and the story dominating a lot of the newspapers this Sunday morning. Jonathan, this explosive interview with Mo Salah. Thrown under the bus. Someone wants me out. No relationship with Slot. Say goodbye to the Liverpool fans before AFCON. What are you reading into this?
Yeah, well, Salah only really generally speaks to the press in the mixer when he's got a message to give, and it's a really strong one. I mean, it looks like, you know, we don't know whether there's something personal has gone behind the scenes with him and Slot, but what it looks like on the face of things is a guy who won Liverpool the title, who played brilliantly last season, who got a fat new contract from the club, and the love of the fans and all of that goodwill, and hasn't played well this season, and has been put on the bench for 3 games basically. And this has exploded his sense of self-worth. I mean, that's basically what it looks like. You know, it's not like, you know, they want me out. Like, they've put him on the bench for 3 games, and he hasn't been worth a place in the team. And Liverpool have been struggling because under the new system, it puts a huge amount of pressure on him, not just to create and score, but also to contribute off the ball, which again he hasn't been doing. So it does look as though he's sort of picked this moment. He's picked a moment when Liverpool aren't doing well, when he feels like he can take control of the narrative ahead of AFCON, ahead of, you know, potentially the January transfer window. And, you know, I think a lot of people at Liverpool in the hierarchy have to bear the responsibility for this, not just the way things have gone this season, but the decisions that were taken that have led them to this point in terms of recruitment, in terms of the decision to give him a new contract. And I think the fact that Salah has felt emboldened to do this now, I think it is a sign of how weak Slot is and how weak Liverpool are.
Dan, just picking up on something Jonathan said there, picking his moments. If we go back to last November, Liverpool won away at Southampton, and he came out into the mix zone. No, I haven't been offered a contract. I'll be leaving at the end of my contract. But he was in a position of strength there, wasn't he? Because he was playing so well, and he knew the fans would add that pressure to Liverpool to get him to sign and offer him what he wants, basically. This time, we're in a position where he's not playing well, but maybe he's picked on maybe the pressure building on Arne Slot, because it feels like now we might be seeing a power play here between Arne Slot and Mohamed Salah.
Yeah, I mean, Jamie Carragher, who Salah had a pop at as well in the interview, came out a few weeks ago and said, well, he only speaks when he wants a new contract. So I guess the question is, what does he want from doing this interview? And I think the obvious thing is to set up, as Jonathan says, a kind of rift between him and Slot. You know, it's him or me, and it does read that way. You know, it's hard to imagine a kind of future for both of them at Liverpool as it stands after this Salah interview. So, again, as Jonathan said, he's in the position of strength. Slot and Liverpool are weak at the moment. In a way, it kind of feels opportunistic. I wonder whether this was planned before the game, because if Liverpool had won that game 2-0, as arguably they should have done, or indeed held on at 3-2, it would have been much harder for Salah to come out and kind of do this explosive take. I think, you know, it's pretty rare that Premier League clubs, look forward to the AFCON, but I guess for Liverpool, it kind of can't come soon enough now. I guess he goes out the way, but this is going to hang over them. And I think, yeah, he's created a kind of him or me scenario, and it'd be fascinating to see how it plays out from here.
James, is interesting. He hasn't sat down with any high-profile interviewers and said, this is how I'm feeling. He's chosen the mix zone. As I mentioned, last November, it was a mix zone after the Southampton game at St Mary's, and now the mix zone at Elland Road.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, because in this day and age, he could have just done this on an Instagram post. But the fact is, and I think Dan's right, if they win that game 2-0, does he speak? Does he wait another week? I think the fact that they've conceded a late equaliser gives him the opportunity. He feels the general kind of mood around the team and the frustrations that they have to think, actually, now's my moment to come and take advantage of this. And that's what I think will disappoint a lot of Liverpool fans, is that he looks like he's taking advantage of a difficult collective situation to highlight his own individual circumstances. And that's not what you want from your best players. I thought Carragher was absolutely right when he said that the other week, that, you know, you need your big players to be speaking publicly and trying to fight against the negativity around the club in those difficult moments. This is not what he's done. This falls into the category of, I was thinking about this, we were talking before about Cristiano Ronaldo, obviously a couple of years ago, when he essentially talked his way out of Manchester United. And Romelu Lukaku, of course, who did something similar with Chelsea when he gave an unsanctioned interview. I think that was to Sky Italy. So, there is a precedent for this. It always ends badly.
Is he talking his way out of Liverpool, though? Or is there something else behind this?
Yes, he's talked his way out of Liverpool. I can't see a way back for him here. And, you can sort of argue how he's been treated, whether he should have had the new contract, all these sort of things. But I think there's sort of two things to say in addition to this. One is that the quote where he lost me was where he said, and I don't have it exactly, but something like, I don't have to prove myself every day. Yes, you do. Every player does. He's been a phenomenal player for Liverpool. He will go down as a legend. But that doesn't mean that you earn some kind of status where you don't have to continue to prove yourself and fall into what the manager's asking you to do. And that brings me to the second point, which is he seemed to have an agreement with Jurgen Klopp that, and I think they both were public about this, that I don't track back, basically. I don't need to do the defensive work because leave me to go and win the game in the final third. And of course he did it, and he did it last season. Now you wonder whether at this time, because he's not been able to be as influenced and effective in the final third, whether they're saying, well, actually, we do need you to do more without the ball. We're in the trenches a bit here. We're not in our rhythm. We're not getting results. We can't afford you to be kind of a special case. And it seems as though it's just not gone down well for him. And 3 games in, not 3 months in, 3 games in, he's decided to come out and speak. It feels premature to me.
I think Ronaldo is a good comparison because as soon as Slot put Salah on the bench for not just 1 but 2 games, and even before yesterday's game, it looked like that situation was going to start to get untenable pretty quickly. And it felt the same when Ronaldo was at United, I think. I don't think these guys are bigger than the club, but obviously they're such huge figures. They've done so much for the club, they've done so much in their career that it kind of inevitably creates this conflict. I didn't expect it to blow up in quite this way, but I think as soon as Salah became less important than he was for Liverpool, it kind of set up this showdown at some point in the future.
I mean, he's trying to force Slot out, isn't he? He's essentially moving against Slot. He's trying to persuade the fans, I think, the Liverpool fans, to turn on Slot, and I don't think it's going to work. I mean, I don't think Liverpool want to be seen to even if they were going to move against Slot. I think ironically this has kind of strengthened his position because they don't want to be in a position where a star player can come out against the manager like that and then they move against him. I think that would set a really, really dangerous precedent.
But I guess the interesting thing, if Liverpool were minded to make a change in the dugout, and I'm not suggesting they were, does this now make it kind of harder to do that?
Yeah,
because
totally.
it will look like player power gone mad.
Yeah, and like players don't, I think there's a danger in players enjoying this kind of state. And, Salah has earned his legendary status at Liverpool just through his sheer weight of goals and what he's done for the club. But it does create a power imbalance where senior players at the club have really not stood up this season. They've not played well. And if you end up in that position, then you end up with a really unequal squad where certain players have, I guess, disproportionate influence on not just on the hierarchy but also the fan base.
James, Ian Ladyman from the Mail on Sunday was at the game yesterday. Jonathan mentioned it there that they don't want Slot to be removed and it might have strengthened his position, what Salah has said. But he said this, look, this is Slot's world right now. This is his team, and until they find a way to do the basic things better, Slot will continue to edge closer to that unthinkable position of a manager sacked just months after winning a Premier League title. It can happen, it shouldn't. Certainly not yet, but it can. Is he in trouble?
Yeah, and one of his senior, most experienced players has made it worse for him. And that's why I think Liverpool fans will feel very conflicted about this, because obviously he has this iconic status, but at the same time he is exploiting their collective malaise to promote his own individual situation. And that is a dangerous thing for anyone to do at any club. And, I think if we all sat here and tried to work out what is Arne Slot's best 11 at the moment, we'd probably all come up with a different lineup. And it's pretty clear that he's trying to work out after, a summer of upheaval, a summer of tragedy. We shouldn't forget that at that club as well. He's trying to find his best 11. And in many ways, this is what we kind of expected would happen in his first season, right? This is when Jurgen Klopp left. I think this is... Everybody thought, well, he's going to need some time to work it out. Maybe they'll make signings. They'll need to, adapt to his style of play. that all didn't happen last year. He kept it ticking over brilliant. I mean, as better than anyone could have hoped for Liverpool. Now he's in this situation where he's got to work out with all these new players, with the players that have left, with the dynamic, maybe the shift in the league being a bit more physical this year and the slightly different demands that it's placing on teams. He's trying to work things out, and every negative result is heightening the pressure on that. And Mo Salah has used another negative result to put further pressure on his own manager.
Dan, Jonathan says no, but is there a world where this power play ends with maybe Mohamed Salah winning and Slot going?
I mean, possibly, yeah. I think as James says, Slot is under a degree of pressure. He has to be, given the results they've had this season. I think most Liverpool fans, or it's hard to speak for a whole fan base, but a lot of Liverpool fans would have said before the West Ham game when Salah was on the bench, something's got to change, and this could be a change we make. So I don't think it was a huge surprise. I think it would be pretty dangerous, as the guys have said, for player power to lead to a manager being sacked. And then again, to compare it to Ronaldo, you kind of end up in this situation where you've got a guy, over in Saudi Arabia who's basically running the club. He's making the key decisions. That's where this kind of leads. So, I think there is a world where Slot goes, but I think it would be pretty dangerous if this was a big catalyst towards that.
Jonathan, let's look at Martin Samuel's piece in the Sunday Times, because he says Salah's position looks untenable after this brazen disloyalty, but keeping him wasn't a mistake. Is that fair, or do you think that the hierarchy have got a lot of questions to answer about what happened in the summer?
No, I totally, and I think I wrote this last season actually, when all those three contracts were up for discussion, that it was actually, it felt like those three players, Van Dijk and Trent Alexander-Arnold and Salah, were almost, they were pushing Liverpool to one last title. And they put in such an effort because it felt like it felt like the last season of the Klopp era, and there was a sense of climax to that, and it would have been, I think, the ideal moment for the long-term future of Liverpool for at least Salah, but probably Alexander-Arnold as well to go. Now, I understand Martin's point about the optics of it. It looks really, this time last year, Liverpool fans, pundits are saying, give him what he wants, give him, whatever he wants to stay at the club, but I think Hughes and Edwards, and this is on them ultimately, they are very handsomely paid to take tough decisions for the long-term future of the club. And I think what they've chosen the easy way out. They've given him the contract, and then they've spent 400 million, very crowd-pleasing. Liverpool won the transfer window, all of that, and totally kind of messed up what Slot was trying to build in that final third. They've landed it here. Here are 5 or 6 totally new forwards. Try and make it work. Now Slot, results may well dictate that he ends up paying for it in the end. But I think the root causes of this go much deeper, and I think ultimately this is on the hierarchy.
Yeah, just picking up on that, James, because when we're looking at the recruitment, and as Jonathan mentioned there, yes, Liverpool have won the transfer window, close to £450 million spent. Was it a bit lopsided, the spend that they had, the players that they brought in? And you talked about, Salah was not required to track back before. Is he required to track back now, not only because of Liverpool's results, but because of the recruitment that happened in the summer? Well,
I mean, as well as they spent and as big as they spent, they missed the big deal that they needed, which was a centre-back. I don't think any of us are sitting here saying that in hindsight. I think we all thought if they get Mark Gay over the line, I think we all thought they'd had the perfect window. But as it is, and you only need to look at the game yesterday, Konate makes that challenge at 2-0, which lets Leeds back into the game, concedes the penalty. Does Mark Gay make that challenge? Probably not. Yes, the squad is imbalanced. I mean, the other thing about it is that, of course, they got Alexander Isak in really late in the window, right? Deadline day, wasn't it? Massive spend, hadn't had a pre-season. Florian Wirtz comes in. Those presumably are the two players who are going to be at the heart of the understanding going forward. They barely played together until the last few weeks, and again it comes back to that point that he's been trying to work out this best 11 while probably not having the squad to cope with the demands across for competitions. And they have left him. Clearly, they've left him short at the back. I think they're inevitably going to have to deal with that in January. I hope that they can rectify the situation. But I think Liverpool are not a sacking club. I don't think they're the kind of hierarchy that are going to look at this and listen to Mo Salah over what Arne Slot's telling them. You don't, you talk about the mistakes that they've maybe made running as a club. You don't spend 450 million quid backing a manager and then sack him because you've suffered a few bad results and one of the big players has come out and spoken against you. You just don't run a club that way.
Just on the game, Dan, I guess those 90 minutes effectively reflected and epitomised what Liverpool are all about at the moment this season, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean they're brittle. I mean, Liverpool last season do not give up a 2-0 lead against a newly promoted side. Obviously, I mean, Elland Road's a tough place to go. I mean, if you show a bit of fight, you get stuck into the opposition, the crowd really get behind you, and it's almost unique in atmosphere in that sense. And I think Liverpool just struggled to deal with that. Once Leeds got a sniff and got back in the game, their tails are up and Liverpool started making silly mistakes. As James said, the Konate tackle was a huge turning point. So, yeah, I think that, they've got problems throughout the team. As we've said, Arne Slot's trying to work out what his best side is. I think that's really unclear. A lot of the new signings, not just in attack, are struggling to settle. I don't think Kerkez has, looked particularly great at left back. He's struggling to link up with Gakpo. I think they're missing Luis Diaz. They look like an imbalanced side and an imbalanced squad. And they're struggling. They're really struggling for rhythm. That said, since dropping Salah, they are actually unbeaten in 3 games. That's the strange thing about this. You can make a pretty compelling case, even though the last 2 results against Sunderland and Leeds have been really disappointing, that actually they've stabilised. They've kind of solidified since he went out of the team, because they were on a pretty horrendous losing streak before that. But I think, they've clearly got kind of problems from back to front. And when you're playing in Europe, when you're playing every 3 days in the Premier League, it is really hard for managers to kind of address that.
There's also been a big drop-off from their key players, right? I mean, let's be honest, Mo Salah wasn't playing very well before he got dropped. That's why he got dropped. Virgil van Dijk, who's been arguably one of the best Premier League centre-halves for years, is nowhere near the level that he's been at this season.
And Konate was being linked with Real Madrid in the summer, wasn't he? I mean, he was being talked about as one of the best centre-halves in the world, and then you look at what he's done this season. It's been really poor. So
we're talking about Slot on the collective issues, but also their big players fundamentally have just not performed at the same level. So when you throw that into the mix, it's a worrying cocktail for any manager.
Jonathan, very, very quickly, we can't leave this game without speaking very quickly about Leeds United. And what a week for Daniel Farke, who was under huge pressure. And a lot of people were saying before the City game, they knew that Leeds had City, then Chelsea, then Liverpool. And perhaps at the end of that, it will be curtains for Daniel Farke. Quite the opposite now.
Yeah, dead man walking, wasn't he? And the fight they showed against City, and then that incredible performance in midweek against Chelsea. He switched to a 3 at the back. I think based on what he saw, the way Leverkusen played against Manchester City in the Champions League with a 3 at the back, and that kind of inspired him into that system, and it seems to be working out for him. I think there's a big part of the Leeds fan base that's still not having him. I think they want a bigger name manager in. I think they want someone, I guess, with a little bit more pedigree. But I think what he's shown so far is a lot of fight and a lot of character. And I think his players are still responding to him.